in the past it was easy to write the Lexus ES off as simply being a tarted up Camry because, well, it kind of was. There's a new Lexus ES out now, and Lexus reckons that by making this bigger and more luxurious than ever before, they can compete with the German establishment with this thing against cars such as this, the all-new Audi A6. The interesting thing about the two cars we have on test here is that they aren't actually at similar levels, and there's a big price difference between them, but it's kind of in the opposite way to what you'd expect. You see, this ES is the top of the range sports luxury, while the A6 is a base 45 TFSI, yet the Lexus is the cheaper one here, and by a significant margin. It's around $75,000, while the Audi over $95,000. So a big gulf in price between them. Yet despite the two grades, both of them have very similar amounts of features, they're both a very similar size, and they both perform fairly similarly as well. And so, my job today is to figure out which one of these cars is the better bet for you sitting at home. Is it this very luxurious Lexus or the much sportier Audi? Well, let's get to it. Sitting inside the Lexus, there's no mistaking it for anything other than a true luxury car, as the array of materials, particularly the incredibly soft and squishy patterned leather throughout, feels incredibly high quality. But the extensive use of faux wood does leave it feeling a bit old school and, dare I say, American in a world of chic European aluminium. The other thing that strikes you about it is the space, as not only is there plenty of room to get comfortable in the front, but the incredibly well-equipped rear seat, which has a power reclining function and infotainment system controls on the centre armrest, is really the place to be, as there are few back seats you can get this comfortable in. Yet despite the slightly dated charm of the Lexus interior, even if it does have a digital instrument cluster and massive infotainment screen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, what's going on under the bonnet is very forward-thinking, even if it's familiar at this point. It's the same as what you'll find in a Toyota Camry Hybrid, a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated petrol engine paired to an electric motor, which makes 160 kilowatts in total and drives the front wheels through a CVT. The gubbins under the Audi's bonnet are significantly different, yet still share some of the same core thinking, as this 2-litre turbo engine has now been fitted with a 48-volt mild hybrid system that allows you to coast with the engine totally stopped. The rest of the drivetrain is far more sophisticated than the Lexus's though, with a 7-speed dual clutch and all-wheel drive putting its pokier 180 kilowatts to the ground. But you can't talk about sophistication without mentioning the Audi's interior, which is simply stunning. It's ultra-modern, crisp, fresh and cool, with sharp lines, extensive use of metals, and some of the best technology around. Not only is Audi's virtual cockpit still the best digital instrument cluster there is, but the new dual-screen infotainment system is slick, clear and easy to use, and it even has wireless Apple CarPlay to boot. Points to the Lexus for interior spaciousness, but the rest go to the Audi for everything else so far. I can't really decide which I want to call my favourite in terms of looks either, as both look good in their own right. The Audi is sleek and subtle, much like its interior, and is a truly beautiful, if understated, design, although the dark grey may have something to do with that. The Lexus being so angular and aggressive does work for me, although it doesn't exactly match its insides and still looks a bit too Camry or Avalon-esque from some angles. But enough about all that. What I really care about is how these two drive. Now, in the case of the ES, the way that this thing drives is very complementary to its interior because it is soft, smooth, and very comfortable. I actually really like the way this ES drives. It's clearly been designed solely with comfort in mind, and as a result, it is superbly smooth. I mean, all of the road imperfections here, well, you just don't feel them. It is that absorbent, the suspension on this thing. And despite it being fairly soft suspension, it still corners relatively well. It's not the flattest through the corners, there is definitely some body roll, but the steering is fairly direct. It handles totally fine, especially so for a large and long front-wheel drive car. It's definitely a lot better than you may expect. I mean, through there, it's pretty balanced. It's just a tiny bit of body roll, especially from the rear end. That's where you're definitely feeling most of it. But for the most part, yeah, I really like it. It's especially quiet in here too, not least right now because the engine isn't actually running. I've got the little green EV light up on the dashboard telling me that it's purely electric only at the moment. So that is the really good thing about these hybrid systems, is just how little you actually have to use the petrol engine when you're driving. I mean, sitting on the freeway for a long time or something like that, they're not really in their element, but lower speeds, sort of double-digit speeds, they're totally fine. And you know, at this point, Lexus and Toyota have really got their hybrid systems very nicely dialed in. The transition between petrol and electric power on them is so unbelievably smooth now. I mean, it's more or less undetectable unless you're watching the little light that tells you exactly what's going on. They're really good systems, and I mean, the results speak for themselves too, in the fact that this is a very big and heavy car, and I'm still doing 6.2 litres per 100. That's better than you get in most hatchbacks, you know. But again, much like the interior itself, you can tell the way that it drives is geared towards driving people in it because of how smooth and dulled out everything is. You want it to be smooth and wafty and pillowy, and that is exactly what this ES is. It is unbelievably smooth in here. I like it. I definitely like it, but I think we can do better. Now, if the Lexus is more focused on passenger comfort than being a real driver's car, the Audi is quite the opposite, because from the moment you sit down behind this really funky steering wheel, you can tell that this has all been set up with the driver in mind. All that technology I mentioned as being so amazing before, it all just gets better and makes even more sense once you're actually sitting here. I mean, this gauge cluster is just so clear and the right size, and really fantastic. It looks so good. And these two center screens have been angled perfectly to face you in the driving seat. They're at different angles and heights and all of that. And it just works. When you glance down, everything falls right in your line of sight. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, through the corners, the Audi is definitely a lot flatter and a lot sharper. It just turns in even more confidently. There's barely a hint of body roll at all. It just feels so planted. And when you get on the power, it's got a lot of it for a 4-cylinder. It really catches you off guard with just how pokey it really feels. I mean, I was, to be honest, expecting this engine to not feel that punchy in a car as big and heavy as this. I thought I was going to sit here and tell you stump up for the V6, which is really fantastic. But the 4-cylinder's fine. It's got enough performance to keep just about anyone happy, except, you know, those with the heaviest of lead foots out there perhaps, but I don't really think they're the A6's target demographic, quite frankly. Now, to achieve this more impressive cornering, obviously the suspension is a little bit firmer in the A6, but to be honest, it's not what you'd call firm at all. The Lexus is especially soft in terms of the way that it rides. It's especially plush, but this Audi is still remarkably comfortable. I have no complaints comfort-wise at all. Yes, over some bumps it can feel a little bit more rigid than the Lexus, but for the most part, it's absolutely lovely. And that power delivery is absolutely lovely too. It is so smooth, this drivetrain, especially, you know, despite it having a dual clutch. I mean, Volkswagen and Audi both have really figured out how to make them nice and smooth transmissions. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of the one in this. And of course, the all-wheel drive system, it just makes it so much more confident through the corners. You never get a hint of, you know, any real understeer or oversteer unless you're driving like a right idiot. Whereas in the Lexus, you can provoke a bit of lift-off oversteer sometimes, being a longer front-wheel drive car. So the Audi, all around, just, yeah, it absolutely takes the cake when it comes to the way that it drives. It is so much better from the driver's seat than the Lexus is. Not necessarily better from the passenger seat, but from where I'm sitting, yeah, it is definitely very impressive. So, Now that I've taken these two things out on the road, I guess it's time to give my verdict, and there can only be one winner. Now, there's no doubt that I definitely like both of these cars, both the way they are inside, they're both so luxurious and so feature-packed, and they're very nice to drive as well. Comfortable, efficient, powerful, especially in the case of the Audi. So, which one do I prefer? Well, it's kind of a two-pronged verdict that I've got here. You see, I think that the ES, its real market is at chauffeurs and people who are driving other people and people who want to be driven in the back. And certainly, if back seats are anything to go by, the ES easily takes the cake in that regard. There's just so many features back there, so much room as well. It's easily the better bet for being chauffeured about in or for chauffeuring others in. The Audi, on the other hand, it's a lot sportier by comparison. Now, it's still very smooth and comfortable and totally lovely in every other way, but it is just that bit sharper to drive. Better engine, better transmission, better steering, better handling. It's just a better package overall on the road. It's not by as big a margin as I was expecting it to be, but it is definitely that bit better. So, which one would I be taking, I guess, is the real pressing question. And I guess what it comes down to is the fact that I can't afford a driver, and I don't really want to be driven around by someone anyway. I'd rather drive myself, and that's why it's got to be the Audi. Thanks for watching. See you next time.